So thank you. So I wanted to give a chance to. I think that the audience will likely have some questions for the three of you, and I want to give them that opportunity. So I think each of them presented a different perspective. Let's give them a second here. Thank you all. All right. Do we have some questions? Oh, so there's an eager soul behind you, Cesar.
Hi, thank you. I'm just wondering if there are ethical or philosophical implications of assigning traits to robots against which and for which we have biases. For instance, we've just looked at robots that had an apparent age, race, and gender that were referred to variously as friends, laborers, fighters, performers, and persons.
This is actually a question that I get a lot, and I do think that it's the responsibility of the designer to realize that we are doing that. We are making those decisions. We are creating entities that have the ability to manipulate humans' emotions, and that's that. And I think about it a lot when I'm working on the design of a new robot. And for me, I mean, we do it anyway with static objects in really subtle ways. Now it's just really become amplified.
All I can say is I spend a lot of money taking very good care of a lot of robots. And, I got to get something out of it. And when I say jump, they're going to jump. And that's all there is to it. I'm paying the bills.
Thank you for coming. I was wondering, I guess it's a slight question. One, the humanism that you were talking about with Goldberg and also with you, with Simon. I guess I'm wondering the border between making the robots look more human, or are we trying to not make them look as human as us? What's the dilemma there? I guess. And the other question would be, like I see with Simon, you have the robot with 3 fingers instead of 4. Was that like a purposeful reasoning behind that for just making 3 fingers instead of 4? And with Goldberg, I just want to say I'm reading. Oh my gosh, we just read one about that divergence between humanity and, I guess, the fascination and then fear. So. I guess they're kind of together, but I was just wondering if you could expand on them a little.
Okay, those are a few questions, but I'm going to try to unpack them. In terms of Simon's hands, to be honest, we worked with Mecha Robotics, and we really focused a lot of the creative decisions around the head, and the body kind of came as it was. It was our starting point. So I wasn't involved in making that decision. And then, like I mentioned in my talk, we really were trying to ride this line between appliance and creature. And we did want you to lose yourself in it the way I described that I certainly did when I was with the robot and it was active. But we also wanted to, it was just so important to set expectations that you still approached it as though it was a machine. And also set expectations about it being learning. So we really talked a lot about kind of toddler proportions and having it look sort of young, look like something that has a lot to learn. So those were things we were really deliberate about.
Well, Carla, I'm curious, would you think about the Uncanny Valley consciously when you design? Because it looks like I love your designs, and they're so beautiful, and I think you are very carefully avoid it. Like, they really don't, it doesn't have that. I mean, I know you do. But I'm just curious about it. Does the Uncanny Valley, do you actually consciously think about it?
Yes. I mean, I certainly knew about it, and I certainly am riffing off aesthetics of existing things. So there are times that I'm using curves that are referencing a face or a doll's face, and then there are other times when I'm also using curves and shapes that are referencing what we know from consumer appliances. So I'm actually it's kind of a mashup, but I'm trying to do it seamlessly.
You know, it's great. And I love that, Mark, you know, you talk about the aesthetics of flames and just the way that you craft this experience that is very much exact. It seems to be like you're really aiming for that real sweet spot right in the bottom of that uncanny valley. And you get it. You hit it.
Zombies.
Yeah. Yeah. No, they're amazing. Other questions?
I actually, am I on? Okay. About the uncanny valley again, a lot of you guys are talking about intuition and a very subjective feeling. And there are those of us, I'm just going to be devil's advocate here, who are obsessed with sort of defining objective ways of measuring or at least characterizing, modeling these things, which, you know, isn't necessarily something that you guys should be doing. But what I'm wondering is, from you guys' perspective, how, so let's say that you have artifacts and humans, or biological entities and man-made entities as concepts. What would happen in the brain is if a concept comes, if a product comes too close to the boundary between those categories, your brain is trying to decide, is it real, is it a living thing or not? And the idea would be that the closer you are to the middle, the increased uncertainty would be correlated with the uncanny valley. So this is kind of like a more, how do I say that, modeling-based like idea of the uncanny valley. So if this kind of view is correct, then those boundaries can be pushed around by experience. So for example, if we have a lot of experience with a particular robot, does it stop being uncanny for those people? So I get asked this question a lot, but I kind of want to hear a non-scientific but more intuitive answer to this idea of that category between living and non-living, and how movable it is and how variable it is from person to person. And I guess you already said you already avoid it, so I was going to ask that too.
I'm actually glad you brought that up because, first of all, I think it varies enormously between people. You know, some people get very hung up on the axes, you know, that they're trying to reproduce some actual function. I think it's meant metaphorically. So, like just measuring déjà vu, right? You wouldn't plot axes for that, I don't think. But I think that, but the temporal factor is huge. What you just mentioned, I think that. That's one of the things, is that once you get to know something, it wears off very quickly, right? So just like the déjà vu, it's a very fleeting kind of phenomenon. That's why, you know, I think in your case, it's the introduction. I mean, when you first see it, right? You talked about kids running out of the room, so it's that first moment that you have to address. Although, Mark, it's kind of interesting because your goal seems to be almost to sustain that uncanny, and I'm curious about how you do that through a performance.
Well, the first thing I'd like to say is that I live with these robots every day. I'm at the shop, I see them, and every day, and I've done crazy, crazy things with the people I know with these robots, focusing on these robots. And you know, you look at them, and it's like you have a friend, right? And one time maybe they walked up and punched you in the face as hard as they could, and then you know you worked it out or whatever, and you were still friends with them. It's kind of like that, you know, like I look at these machines, I go, Jesus Christ, that thing almost cut my hand off. Like, oh, it fell on this, oh, God, you know. And I'm in there late at night, there's no one else around. I'm in there and I'm like, oh, God. And you walk by and you just look at me and you go, oh, Jesus. And it never changes. It's always, I look at them and there's like a different memory, and you're at night and it's almost like you feel like they called to you. You'll look over, and you know, I'm not saying that I'm a rational person or sane or anything, but you know, there are like compacted memories that go back 30 some years with some of these things, and they don't go away, you know, unless I'm not, you know, you have to be an alcoholic or a drug addict to wash that stuff away. So you have to, and it's still like the day it happened, you know. I still think about those crazy things.
Mark actually has the machine separated at the shop, so there's like an old folks' home where the older machines live.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then for me, I think a lot of it does come to how the robot is programmed. I mean, with the humanoid robots, it's still always surprising. There are still moments of movement that just catch you off guard and just still feel alive. But when you start engaging in the conversation, you know, and these, again, it's an ongoing project, so there are certain exercises that you can do with the robot, and you do feel that you do feel like it gets repetitious. And, you know, and I think about that it's especially true with consumer products. You know, when we were designing the floor cleaning vacuum, we really wanted to be sensitive to the difference between the first time, we call it the out-of-the-box experience, and you have an opportunity to take advantage of the relationship and all of the trust and hope and excitement, and you've just brought it home, and the dog is sniffing it, and it's this new part of the family, and that's a time when you can kind of amplify the interaction. But then, you know, a month into it, if it's done this like bloop, 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 50 times, and it's the same thing, and it's not actually that sophisticated, that it's going to be changing. I think that's really going to be the challenge for product design, is having objects that are learning from you and responding and feeling alive through their conversation, not so much necessarily the movement.
You know, I love that you mentioned the dog sniffing the robot, because this comes up also. Eric is talking about the smell of Mark's machines. And actually, I just took a whiff of that 3D printing. It was delicious. And I think there's some, I don't know, we don't usually talk about the olfactory effects of all this, but we're very, you know, fleshy beings. And I'm just curious if you ever think about the smells of these robots, and do you actually, can that be part of this equation? I don't know.
Well, there is a project that's called Ollie, I think by a group that calls themselves Mint Labs, and they have it programmed such that when you can program it, when a certain person sends you an email, it smells of cookies and the scent gets released. And I do think about it because when I teach this course called Smart Objects, and I break things down into all the ways an object can express itself. And then one day I realized that was missing from the spectrum, and so now I kind of add it in there for part of the conversation in class.
Well, what I think that everyone says that all they want is what people really want is love. But I think what people really want is people want to live in a world like an elfin world where every single thing is alive. I think that's what people really want. Where the chairs are alive, where the tables are alive, where the flowers are alive, in a way that's not indisputable. I think that's what people really want.
Other questions?
Pee-wee's Playhouse.
I have a question. I have the mic. Is somebody?
Where's the mic?
Sorry. I wanted to ask two things. Do we get a chance to see these wonderful flame throwers? I sort of.
They've been playing all day out there in the lobby.
Oh, that's your work. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
The machines.
Yes. No, I understand. I
fighting.
didn't realize that was. And then the other thing was, do you know of people that are using machines as characters, acting with each other, more classically, like classical theater, where they're trading lines or moving together across the stage, more like a conventional play? Do you know anybody that's doing that kind of work?
Well, you know, in Europe, where every artist is on a trust fund and arts organizations get funded, there are all kinds of, there's La Feria del Baus, who always have performed with, you know, a few machines, but also Royal Deluxe does big pageants. You know, it's more traditional kind of use of mechanics, but, you know, it's about bringing to life kind of inanimate sort of fantasies using mechanics. And, you know, there are a number of them there, but that's also because, you know, it's very expensive to do that. That's the problem. People are cheap. Life is cheap. And robots are very expensive. So that's, I think, the barrier at this point.
I have more of a comment, but it's going to be a quick comment. I just wanted to point out that traditionally when people are talking about robotics, they try to make them like human beings. We've been talking about that all morning. What's our feelings? Mark Pauling does exactly the opposite. And where his machines hit is that visceral part, that unheimliche. It's where You're confused. It looks like it's a human being. Your brain, all of us who were talking about brains this morning, you know, it's hitting all these different synapses in your brain in terms of confusing you. If you have never seen an SRL show, you should. Good luck finding one.
It's the first contact conundrum, right? Alien life, non-life.
I've been to a couple of the shows, and I don't think they look anything like humans. But okay. So anyway, Carla, I really loved your talk, and there was something I've been thinking about it ever since you got off the podium. What's been bugging me, and I think I figured it out. So you had the you gave the example of that cute creature with the yak ears, right? Okay, and you backed away from it when you decided that it scared the children. The children ran away. And I guess what's bugging me about that is why are we using children as some sort of standard for design? If we let children choose things for us, I mean, Santa Claus and clowns wouldn't exist necessarily. So I was wondering if you could comment on that.
Oh, yeah, sure. So first of all, I have to say that and with the Simon and Curie projects at Georgia Tech, I very much rely on the experience and knowledge of Dr. Andrea Tamaz, who runs the Socially Intelligent Machines Lab. And she comes to those projects with a career of knowledge about her experience with humanoid robots. And the Leonardo robot was something that she had worked on as a PhD student at MIT. And these robots really, they exist as research robots. So that's primarily, pretty much entirely their purpose. And as research robots, children are a big part of the research. And they're almost like the canaries in the coal mine in that they are expressing in, you know, they don't hold back as much in terms of how, you know, and I just like to tell that story because it's funny, but you know, it also was falling into this uncanny valley of being a live creature for adults as well, and it wasn't so much again my decision, but I rely on Dr. Tamaz's expertise, and that was something that she definitely wanted to use as a starting point for this new project.
Okay, well, one last question.
So another thing that I kind of noticed, I've worked a lot in virtual reality, about the uncanny valley is not just in appearance and that sort of behavior, but when I brought my puppy home 13 years ago, I remember, like, for weeks just staring at him sleeping and watching his breath and thinking, how does this mechanism that's so new and not formed not stop, you know, and I have to check it. But after a few weeks, because he's organic, he had sort of proved to me it's going to be fine, and I don't worry about that now, you know, at all. You know, someday he will cease to, you know, breathe, but it's part of a natural span. It's a graceful sort of fault modes that happen in most cases. But with these built objects, even the appliances in my life that have never broken, there's always in the back of my mind, it will likely fail, and fail in an unexpected and catastrophic way. And so, like, if something's learning with me, I don't trust it, because what if it gets erased like that? You know, I don't know what its failure mode's going to be, and it keeps me always on edge. And I think that happens for a lot of people, even when they start interacting with these things more naturally, and they become part of their lives, there's always this trust issue about how it may abandon them that's different, though not necessarily less extreme, than biological organisms that may abandon them. Mm-hmm. What do you think about that?
Well, I think about this a lot as well, and I in the piece that I just wrote for The Atlantic, I was looking at this device that's called the Carrots, and it's an internet-connected it's a rabbit sculpture that's internet connected, and you know, trust is one of the main places that the experience broke down for me. So I talked a little bit about how that has to be really a pillar in terms of a connected appliance. But as a designer, one of the most important things is feedback. And when I talk about light, sound, and movement and the ways that an object expresses itself, the purpose of that expression is largely feedback. It's largely to continuously keep the conversation going in a way that's not annoying but gives me the information that I need to have. So, I mean, the breathing's a really great example. You know, the example that's most often used for expression is the light on a Mac laptop does this 12 glows per minute in the same way that human breathing. And we intuitively look at it and say, oh, it's okay, it's alive, it's breathing. And that's such a big challenge as designers, that to instill this sense of trust and to actually let the user know what's failing and why and when.
I like that you use the puppy's breath as a kind of, because it brings me back to the olfactory thing again somehow. But I think that I feel like actually I'm worried about the opposite problem, where we trust machines too much, and that we just feel like they're gonna be there, they're gonna do stuff, and you know, that we expect the lights are gonna be on and that things are gonna work. And I think a lot of my thinking about artwork is that as an engineer, I'm trying to kind of create environments where that trust gets kind of questioned, and to sort of reawaken a kind of disbelief or anxiety about those machines, so that we don't trust them too much. I think that's really what's really important, is to keep that trust on edge. I don't know if that's something you think about, Mark.
Yes. Yeah, I think that what you're talking, I mean, just imagine if you knew your puppy had a genetic defect and it could die at any second, right? Well, that's just the way that devices have been, historically speaking. I mean, that's what the ISO 9000 specifications were all about. They're all about creating a set of rules whereby things are manufactured in a way that's traceable and predictable, so that they're more reliable. That's why the things you use, like, you know, your phone, these things are built to standards that were they're aerospace standards in the 60s. Well, regular things weren't built to those tolerances and standards. And as things approach more of a complete, perfect synchronization with the laws of physics, things that are made by humans will be basically 100% reliable. They'll be able to work forever, essentially. And that eventually will happen. And it's just a question of understanding the physics of the materials and the construction process. Well, the economics all these are changing, but at a certain point, your devices will be more reliable than things that are alive. Your devices won't die.
Great. Okay, let's thank the panel, Carla and Ken and Mark. I just also want to say, hopefully all of you have learned something today. I certainly have. I feel there's some cautionary tales we've heard about the future, as well as some hopes of the future. And I think there's some interesting, hopefully we've met some new friends, and hopefully that will carry on. We have some beverages for you outside. I just want to, in conclusion, not only thank all the speakers and moderators, but thank our sponsors again, Citrus, the Townsend Center, and also the Netherlands, the Kingdom of the Netherlands, for their generous donations. Also the executive, the UC Berkeley's Office of Executive Vice Chancellor and Provost Kathy Koechlin, and moreover, even the people that really lent their time, and really to Lara Wolf and Cesar Torres and Chris Myers, carried a tremendous amount of weight in kind of putting this thing together. So let's give them a hand, as well as, well, a host of other volunteers and moderators and colleagues. So let's have the conversation continue. Let's insert some elixirs. They're outside for you. I will join you in a moment. Thank you again, everyone.